Welcome in, everyone, to a very special episode of American Joyride. I'm David Hookstead, and I'm joined by an awesome guest today, Marcus Capone. He is a SEAL Team 6 veteran and a veteran's mental health advocate. Marcus, thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, David, thank you. Excited to be on the show and see what you got to throw at me.
People always say you got to get more SEALs on. You got to get more SEAL Team 6 guys on. We've been pushing out, getting more in. So I'm really excited to have another one in the fold. And I want to start kind of at the background for you. How did you find yourself in the Navy, becoming a Navy SEAL?
Yeah. So I grew up in a household in New York. I grew up on Long Island in a beach community, Long Beach, New York. And I really didn't grow up with if you want to call it a patriotic background. My wife actually did, from the Midwest. She wrote a letter to the veterans at 11 years old, which we still have in the living room here, framed, which I think is pretty cool. But my dad served. He was an MP, military police in the Army. He was a dog handler. Never went to Vietnam. My grandfather, his father fought the Italians in North Africa in World War II. He was a howitzer commander. And but I never grew up with this kind of rah-rah patriotic household. I think, both my parents were so-called hippies. They both went to Woodstock. And when I think it was right before my senior year in college, I told them I wanted to go in the Navy. I wanted to be a SEAL. They kind of scratched their heads because they didn't understand where that was coming from. But, I went to school in the Midwest. I was on a football scholarship, and, I was surrounded by a lot of individuals that, served in the military and then went back to college on the, GI Bill. So I started hanging around a lot of these folks, a lot of former or a lot of rugby players. And I got along with a lot of these individuals. We were very much alike. I thought they were just more mature. They were a few years older than I was, and I wanted to be like them. And so my senior year, I saw something. I saw a special on the Discovery Channel. I saw a movie that was completely fiction that I really enjoyed. And next thing you know, I was enlisting 6 weeks after I graduated my senior year in 2000.
And did you enlist right away with the intention of, I'm gonna go to Buds as soon as I go to basic? Was that always the intention? I'm going to be a Navy SEAL.
Yeah, I mean that's the honest reason why I joined the military. Again, I didn't grow up, with this long history of knowing about the military or being this quote unquote patriot. It wasn't like the only thing that was important in my household was football, baseball, basketball, skiing, swimming. That's all I did growing up was play ball. And so I went down to the recruiting station before my senior year of college, and I went and talked to the Navy recruiter, and I said, "Hey, I want to be a SEAL." And he said, "Do you even know what you're talking about?" And I said, "No, not really." He said, "Well, you're at the university, correct?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, you could become an officer." And I said, "Well, great. What's that?" I mean, it was like, I was that dumb when it came to understanding the difference even between an enlisted person and an officer. And so when he said that, he said, "Yeah, you should be talking to the officer recruiting crew." And so he sent me to St. Louis, and I met with the officer recruiter, and I tested out for every officer program in the Navy except Naval Special Warfare, which was a 5326 designation. I think it was 5326 for officers. That was enlisted. I forgot what the designation was, but anyway, it was the only one I didn't make, which was Naval Special Warfare. It was a SEAL officer. But I got picked up for every other officer program. But David, it's not why, I was going into the military. I wanted to be a SEAL. So when I found out that I made every other officer program except the SEAL program, I said, "No, thank you." And I went ahead and enlisted the next day.
I love that. You could have been an officer, and instead you go to be enlisted to be a Navy SEAL. That's actually incredible. Good for you. When you get to buds, what was the reality of buds compared to what you kind of thought it was going to be?
Well, first I thought it was, I thought it was me. So when I even showed up in San Diego and I got into Coronado, I had my A school. It's like the working, the schools you go to before you go to buds or before you go out to a ship in the Navy. You learn a trade. And so the trade I was learning was sonar tech at the time. This was 2000. And so we would sneak over near the Bud's compound just to watch and see, the guys running across the street with boats on their heads and everything else. And so I remember the first time I saw a bunch of the guys running across the street, I was like, whoa, this is real. Like this is really happening. I don't just see it on TV anymore. So that was a bit of a, I don't want to say a shock, but it was pretty cool to see that this is really happening. And then I was in class 236, which started in 2001, spring 2001, April 2001. And it was, it was everything that you hear about. I think there's enough stories out there now that there's too many stories out there, really, including this one. Chalk up another one. But it was as tough as anything that you read about, and probably tougher, honestly. I think it's tougher when you're going through it because there's just only so much that you can gain from, reading or watching videos, but to actually experience it is another level.
Did you ever feel at any point when you were going through buds, like, did you come close to quitting, or when you showed up, you're like, I'd rather die right here than ring that bell and quit?
I had one moment of weakness during all of buds. And that was, I think it was Wednesday night of Hell Week. For some reason, you hadn't slept in a couple of days. You're tired. You're all that, you're tired. You're hungry. You're cold. You're starting to question, what are you doing? This is ridiculous. And I remember like breaking down for like 3 seconds and going like, what am I doing here? And then kind of coming to and getting back in line and going through the chow hall at the time. So it wasn't I never ever thought about quitting. I just thought it was something I had to get past to get on to the next thing, to be a SEAL. So quitting never actually went through my mind, but I did have this like moment of just, why am I here? And I think it was more because I was just out of it and I was pretty tired, almost hallucinating at that time. But that was it. Other than that, I just saw it as a school I had to get through to get to my platoon and go overseas.
What's interesting is you just said you started your buds class in the spring of 2001, which means that 9/11 is what, 6 months away from happening, 5 months away from happening, maybe right around that time window.
Yeah.
So are you out of buds by the time 9/11 happens, or were you still in training? And can you take the viewers kind of where you were on 9/11 and how much confusion was there and things of that nature?
Yeah. So I was in third phase. We only had a few weeks left of training, of buds, before we went on to SEAL qualification training, SQT. We were actually doing PT in the morning. It was, what was it, like 6? I don't know the exact times the towers came down, but we were right in the middle doing push-ups and sit-ups and flubber kicks, and one of the instructors came outside from their area. They just said, hey, planes just hit the World Trade Center, and the World Trade Center came down, and we immediately thought it was another just another joke that the instructors were pulling on us. We didn't believe it was real. We kind of looked at each other and said, why are they still messing with our heads? We're about to graduate in a couple of weeks. But they actually marched us inside, and we watched, we saw it on the news, and it was pretty, it was pretty humbling. We didn't know at the time really what was going to go on. I mean, we were young. You had guys that were 17 years old. I was 23 at the time. We had a few older than that, but like, let's just say everyone was right around 20, 21 years old. So we really didn't know what was going to happen, but the instructors did. And I've said this in other interviews and podcasts and things, that the look on the instructors' faces it was something, it was scary. They knew exactly what was going to happen. They knew that, they had served prior to 9/11. There wasn't a lot going on in all the forces. There was work in Bosnia, but only a few platoons were able to go overseas and actually be involved in any real world operations, and if there was any combat. So there wasn't a whole lot of experience at the time, but you could see the look on their faces that they knew that the SEAL teams were going to go to war. And I just remember the expression and kind of the whole demeanor completely changed. And so for us, went from running around, getting in shape, and having fun to, wow, this is real, and we're going to go do something real.
I love kind of what you talked about, the instructors there. I interviewed a guy probably a year and a half ago by the name of Bill Rapier, who served on DevGru for a considerable amount of time. And he told me when 9/11 happened, at that point in time, like you said, the 90s, you had Bosnia, there were 4 SEALs in Black Hawk Down, the Gulf War, but it wasn't anything like we saw in the War on Terror. So everyone kind of thought, oh, we'll train for 20 years. Maybe we get one mission. We'll talk about that mission forever, and that'll kind of be our legacy. And Bill Rapier was like, we had no idea that we were about to be at war for 20 plus years. I mean, he said they had no idea. And on that, so now it's happened. How long does it take you to get deployed for the first time, and where is that to?
Yeah, you mentioned Bill. I don't know if Bill knows me. He was in the teams for a while when I got over there, and someone I looked up to, and someone who had just a stellar reputation of doing everything right. And happy to hear that he was on this show. I haven't heard that name in a long time. So, yeah, I mean, the way it worked was you went through Buzz, you did your 6 months of training at Buzz, then you did your 6 months of training at SQT. These times fluctuate, they constantly change, but let's just say you have a year of training, plus or minus, to finally become quote unquote, a SEAL and get your pin. And then you go to your platoon, and your platoon at the teams could be, you can step in your platoon and deploy right away. Usually not, but it happens all the time. For the rest of the guys, they go to platoon, they work up 3, 6 months, 2 years. And that's what it's like. So some individuals, you're not going overseas for another 2 years. Everybody thinks the war is going to pass so quickly. I don't think anybody thought, as Bill mentioned, that we were going to be fighting a war for the next 20 years, 2 of them. And then on, other fronts. Yes, it was, I tell people you got everything you asked for and more. And I have some friends that never did a peacetime deployment, just constantly deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan from the day they stepped in till the day they retired.
That must, and we're going to get into kind of the mental aspect of that a little later here. Where was the first place you deployed to once you finally left and you were in the war? Was it Iraq or Afghanistan?
I deployed to Afghanistan in 2005, and it was everything I asked for. It was, I'll say it was great. It was it was a serious time. It was a shitty time at the same time. My task unit was it was a lone survivor task unit. So there was we just had a significant loss of friends from our sister platoon, and we had we were sitting in Germany waiting for them to, we kind of do the high five and switch out after several months of deployment. And we were actually supposed to deploy first, and we lost a coin toss back in Virginia Beach. which sent us to sent us to Germany first, sent our sister platoon to Afghanistan first, and unfortunately, I think the story. The helicopter got hit by an RPG, and we lost. We lost almost all of our sister platoon. But we wind up showing up in July, right after the helicopter went down, June 28th, and staying there for several months. And we went to work right away. First couple of days we were there, we did a night raid, just like everything you read about. Loaded Black Hawk helicopters, flew right to a target, fast roped, right onto a building, put explosive breaching charges. I was a lead breacher, kind of blew the compound in, cleared the compound, kind of as the sun was coming up, and just like, whoa, this is this is real. And so it was just, it was what we signed up for. And it happened pretty quickly.
One of the questions that I always find most fascinating, I know the viewers do too, is I've heard from a lot of former Tier 1 guys or guys that maybe were in the Army Rangers, Green Beret, whatever it might be, that they've seen guys who do all the training for years and years, and then they get into combat for the first time and they just realize this just isn't for me. Like, it's not what I thought. I'm not pulling the trigger like I thought maybe I would. Obviously, guys that stick around, that's a problem they don't have. For you personally, was there ever any doubt in your mind that when the time came and your boots hit the ground and bullets were flying, was there any doubt whether or not you were going to be able to do it?
No, I mean, maybe I was too dumb. No, for me, I can't speak for other individuals. Everything I witnessed on my side of the house, in the teams, the guys I worked with were, they wanted to be there. We all wanted to be there. We all wanted to go do right for our country. We wanted to do things greater than ourselves. And so, when, bullets started flying, I saw nothing but courage, bravery, guys trying to get into the fight. I never occurred to me that, this is not for me, and I didn't see that. Maybe it was going on with certain individuals, but I don't know. My first deployment there, I seemed to somehow get my nose right in the mix of everything. Seemed to be that way my whole life in all types of things. But yeah, I never saw that, David. Maybe there were some things like much later on, but no, I saw nothing but, as I mentioned, courage and bravery and grit, and trying to help your buddy, trying to do the right thing, trying to get in the fight, trying to be the first in the door. So yeah.
I love that. That's such an American. That's such a great thing to hear as an American civilian who never served in the military. Now, you're talking about putting a breaching charge on a door. This is just a question that popped up in my mind. When you're putting that charge on the door, how loud is that thing, and how close are you to it when it's going off? Because I imagine that's got to ring your bell, which maybe some will tie in a little later in the interview. But how loud is that blast when you're doing something like that?
Yeah, it's well, I think like everything, it depends. There's nothing black and white. Sort of like a big hit in football. When there's a huge hit, it feels good and you get all fired up. And then when you're on the receiving end, you get up slowly and kind of wring your head and go, "Oh man, that really sucked." It rattled your teeth and you saw stars, or you were kind of knocked unconscious for a few seconds. That's kind of what explosions are like. Also, you can, I loved explosions. I loved I loved football. I loved contact. Again, I loved being on the offensive end of it. And, even a good hit that rocked your world, you show stars, you kind of shake your head and go, oh yeah. Because that's what makes you feel alive, right? But then, there were other times, and that's what it was like with breaching too. I felt like every time a charge went off, or, you felt that concussion of a grenade or a shoulder fired, rocket. Yeah, it was great. But then there were other times where you went, oh shit, I was a little too close to that one. And, there's, training is a lot easier. There's a lot more safety built in for obvious reasons. There's minimum safe distances, David, that you're supposed to be at to make sure that, these calculations are done to protect you, protect your body, protect your brain. I don't think we knew at the time, what the effect of our mind and body would be. I think, now we're seeing that, we probably took a lot more than we needed. It was probably good for us. But, it's the loudest thing you've ever heard, ever. I mean, the loudest plane you've ever heard flying overhead, or in a subway system, or, I'm trying to make it where, an individual listening could understand. But you wear ear protection for a reason. I mean, if you don't, you're going to blow your ears out 100%. Pulling the trigger and shooting a weapon that's not suppressed is loud enough. Shooting indoors is even worse. Now, this is without ear protection. Shooting off an explosive charge or being near an explosion without any ear protection is just that much worse. And so it can be, it can be deafening. It can be deafening. So
if I'm in a room and, I'm in the room that the breach is on the other side of the door, is that blast so loud that it's almost like a flashbang going off? Like, am I going to be disoriented if I'm on the other side of that door to the point to where I'm not even going to have any idea what's going on when people start coming through?
Yeah, I mean, you might be knocked out, for sure. You might be knocked out. You're going to be disoriented. Depending, again, we say depends how close you are, depends how big the room is. If you're in a football-sized field room and you're on the other side, I don't know, you might hear it. You're in a smaller room right next to it, you're really going to feel it. All the above. It's like everything else. It just depends on a host of different things. Whether you're in corners or not, that can reverberate the amplitude of the force. I'm going to get technical. So,
how many deployments do you do before you make the decision that you want to go to the Tier 1 counterterrorism unit, DevGru SEAL Team 6? And what was the thinking behind that decision?
Yeah. Well, since all that information is already out there, I guess I could speak more freely on it now. Usually you do one or two deployments or one or two platoons. The individuals over at Dev Group want experienced operators to work at that level. And so I actually went over there after I screened after my first platoon, and I was just told, I got picked up, but I was told, go do your other deployment. There's 40 guys that are ahead of you that have been around a lot longer. We like you, you're what we want over here, but go do your second deployment, and there'll be a spot waiting for you to try out when you come back. So it's kind of like how I, that was kind of the what I got from the instructors over there when I screened.
So that is fascinating. I've never heard something like that before. So you put in, when you say screen, you put in like a packet or paperwork, you go talk to them, and then they tell you, if I'm understanding this correctly, you got a lot of potential. We like where your head's at. But you're just not there quite yet. When you come back, you can do green team in attempt selection. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, no, I think I was just, yeah, no, I think I was, yeah, I mean, they just had, guys that had screened before me, right? So, it's kind of like, a pecking order, right? I mean, I did one platoon. There were guys probably years of experience ahead of me. And so it was just, for me, it was the first time I was allowed to screen. And so I just said, like, why not? This is where I want to be. And I was going over there. I was screening, expecting to not be able to go over there after that next deployment anyway. So I didn't, I didn't expect to be able to, get picked up and go over there early, which, there are cases which guys do. And I think that's pretty cool.
As much as you can, you said buds, there was only one moment where you had a moment of weakness, and maybe, like you said, it was just exhaustion, maybe more than anything else. Which did you find to be more difficult and challenging, becoming a Navy SEAL or going to DevGru SEAL Team 6?
I think screening for Dev Group was a lot more stressful than buds. I think buds was everything I'd done in my whole life prior to that. Just, I worked hard. I never quit. I was determined. And if you just keep going, you're gonna make it. Now, granted, you got to have your head between your shoulders, and you can't be an idiot to make it through buds. But the main point of buds is if you want it or not, right? If you really want to be there or not, physically and mentally. And if you want to be there, then we'll train you, right? So if you don't quit, you're going to be there. And as long as you can get through the evolutions and pass the evolutions, you're going to be there. Over at Dev Group, it was more on your skill of how well you performed. And, for me, that took a lot more out of, there was a lot more anxiety there because you were constantly being tested, even though you were always tested going through buzz, but you were being recorded, and everything that you were doing was being scored, and those scores were put out in the open for everybody to see. So if you had 45 individuals going through class, let's say 80, every day you'd wake up, you'd find your name on this board, 1 to 80. Yeah. Marcus. Every day, it would be somewhere on this board that, how well did you shoot the day before? How well did you do on your, PT test? How well did you do this? How well did you do that? Much of it's on shooting. And so if you have one bad day, you can be down at the bottom of the list, and that causes that'll cause a lot of stress and anxiety going into the next day, thinking, man, I hope I'm going to be here. So it's definitely a different mindset. For me, it was, it was definitely a lot more cerebral going to Dev Group than it was going through Buzz.
On that point about, the rankings and kind of having that stress of knowing I'm competing with everyone, and I also can see I'm doing well, or maybe I'm not doing well. What, in your mind, if you had to analyze it, what's the difference between an average SEAL Team 6 operator and then a guy that is just, he's playing a different game than everyone else? And I don't know if there's like a name, but I'm talking about, like, what's the difference between the all-star guy and then the average? Does that exist? And if it does, what qualities or attitude is in between them?
I saw the guys, at least the ones that I looked up to and respected, were they always had their wit with them. They never lost their cool. Never had to tell anybody how good they were, or that to me, I don't know where I got that from growing up, but I was kind of always told, without being told, you have two ears and one mouth, and I couldn't stand the individuals that talked all day long, told you how good they were, just talked crap about anything. And because I always felt that the second you opened your mouth about something, you're going to get slapped at some point. You're going to get brought down to reality. And so I always was a humble individual, and I always respected the individuals that were humble. And I felt like always the best operators that I looked up to and worked with were guys that you never had to tell you how good they were. They were just good, in including leadership. The senior, the officers that I served with. Of course, the best officers were never the ones that had to yell or scream or raise their voice. They were just good leaders, and they can just look you in the eye and tell you like it is, and tell you what you need to know. And when they didn't know the answer, they'd ask for advice and opinions. And those were the best guys in my opinion, David. And I worked with plenty of them.
I love hearing that it's just loaded with, not to quote Bill Rapier again, but I will, but the way he said it is, every dude is that dude.
Yeah, and he was like, he never said anything. And here I am telling you, he's probably one of the best guys I looked up to, because he didn't have to. You looked at the guy, he was a stud. I think he was like a, black belt in BJJ, and could do everything: shoot, move, communicate, lead. But I don't think I ever heard a word, maybe ever, from him, right? Aside from, saying hello or maybe doing some type of training evolution. And those are the individuals that I really,
I mean, you get to your squadron now, you're a tier 1 operator. You were already the tip of the spear with the SEALs. Now you're at the tiniest tip of the spear at the tier 1 element. Did they welcome you with open arms, or was there a bit of a transition period there where you kind of need to prove yourself to the guys who were already there?
Yeah, I think there's always a transition period. Even when we showed up, there's a few of us that were quote unquote, you're a new guy again. I mean, I was in Green Team with individuals that had 4 or 5 platoons under their belt, and they show up over at the tier 1 unit, and they're new guys again. But in reality, when you see the level of performance from the individuals that are there, you understand why you're a new guy again. I mean, people they just don't understand it, or the ones that were not there, get upset about, the differences in how an individual performs, but it's very real. And I witnessed it. And so you go over there like humble again, because guys are moving so freaking fast that you just can't even believe that you're just trying to keep up with them. And all fast is from experience of doing it over and over again. So yes, you have to go back to your question. You do have to, prove yourself again, because those individuals now are leaning on you to cover their 6, and you got to make sure that you're up to their speed. And so, again, the stress level, you get out of training, you feel good, and now you go to your team of guys who've been there for 10 or 15 years. I feel like that's a whole nother stress level that you got to deal with, making sure that you are good in their eyes.
And what year is this now, where you're on a squadron and you're ready, you're fully in, you're ready to rock and roll?
2006.
Okay, so 2006 is, for our viewers who might be watching, that is kind of 2005, 2006 is when the insurgency in Iraq, correct me if I'm wrong, was really, really, really bad, correct?
Yeah, I'd say from, arguably 2006 to 2010, 11, 12 was operationally probably the, I'd say the greatest operational tempo that, at least our military unit had. I can't speak for other units, but many of them are the same, right? They kind of ebb and flow, and you're part of that whole push. But yeah, it was extremely busy.
And that's kind of the segue I wanted to take. What is the difference? Can you explain to the audience what the difference is from when you were a Navy SEAL before you went to DevGru, in terms of when you're deployed? how often you find yourself in intense situations compared to when you're a tier 1 operator? Is there a gap? Is it similar? Are you in way more combat at the tier 1 level?
I think, again, it depends. I think it depends on what unit you're with and at what time. I mean, there's so many conventional units that have been in the worst situations and firefights and experiences, for days and weeks or deployments. And then there's, tier 1 units that have done the same, and others that have sat and not have done almost anything for months on end, right? And so, again, I always go back to, it kind of depends where you were at what time. But if you want to look at it like overall, probably the tier 1 units were definitely operating pretty regularly from that time, multiple units, SEAL Team 6 and Delta, and then kind of the downstream units from there, like the attached SF units and Ranger elements, and so there was a lot of work going on at the time. So it was just extremely busy, and there was a lot of experience happening.
When it comes to dealing with insurgents or religious fanatics, however you want to, however those people want to be described, I've interviewed a lot of guys who say that there was a mental shift that they had to undergo, especially guys that were in the early invasion of Iraq when they were fighting Saddam's conventional forces, and now all of a sudden they're fighting suicide bombers, which is not at all what they had, prepped and prepared for. For you, did fighting people who were glad to blow themselves up, kill civilians, really didn't care about dying jihadists, what was your experience with that?
David, can you, I lost you at dying jihadists.
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm asking a lot of guys I've interviewed said that there's been a mental switch between when they fight conventional, like, uniformed soldiers compared to jihadists who will just blow themselves up, kill civilians, execute civilians, and that they had to mentally change what their thought process was and their tactics when it came to dealing with those animals, if you will. And for you personally, did you have any experience dealing with jihadists, and was it different than maybe anything you'd seen previously?
I mean, we approached every mission. Every mission is different, but then on the other side of that, every mission is the same, right? I mean, we prepared similarly to go after, bad actors. And so tactics do change. Obviously, with, intelligence of going after someone that's going to blow themselves up, that's got a very large kill radius, probably not going to go run in after them right away and go chasing after them. And so, really, it's more just the tactic that's changing versus the mindset. The mindset is, if you need to be dealt with, you're going to get dealt with. If you're a bad guy, you're going to get shot. Whether I don't care what uniform you're wearing, it doesn't matter. If you're a threat to me or, my team or to, civilians, they're all going to be dealt with the same way. And that's how we approached anyone that we were going after. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but the mindset is, the only thing that changes is really the tactic of, how you're going to approach these individuals. But in terms of, rules of engagement, they stay somewhat similar in terms of, if they're a threat or if a threat's presented at you, you take the appropriate action.
Let me ask about that real quick, because one of the things, I'm a huge history buff, which is why we're sitting here talking, because I love sharing stories from other people. In World War II, for example, you could look across the field and say, okay, those guys are wearing German uniforms. They're Germans. They were in Japanese uniforms. They're Japanese. We're wearing American. Everyone, we can identify who's who here. If you're in Iraq or you're in Afghanistan and someone's wearing civilian clothes, or I know 3 different guys that got shot in the same stack by a guy dressed as a woman in a burqa who had an AK and flipped it on him. How hard is it to identify that's just an innocent person going about their day, or that could be a suicide bomber? They could have a gun under their clothes.
Well, I mean, that's why you come back kind of all fucked up, right? Because you're when it gets to that point, you can never turn yourself off, David. So you can never switch your senses. You're constantly on. If everybody's a threat, then there's only so much your body can take, and every woman walking across the road, every child, every male, you have to kind of have to watch them, watch their hands, watch what they're doing, who are they talking to, anybody on a phone, you're getting nervous, are they looking at me, are we about to get hit? So yeah, it's that's definitely a different mindset in terms of just you're constantly on guard. You're constantly on guard when you're working in unconventional environments like that, where you really don't know who's good, who's bad. Everyone's waving at you, right? And you're waving back, and you're like, is this person really, are they waving at me because just because they are, and they're not really a good individual? So yeah, it's stressful.
I just have a couple more questions on your career, and then I really am excited to get into the mental health and your process with dealing with that. Is there a memory you can share that you just thought to yourself, like, we are lucky we made it out of that situation alive, or I'm lucky that I'm still breathing after that operation?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a bunch of them. I mean, there's one when I was actually at SEAL Team 10, again, right after the fortunate loss of our buddies in the helicopter. I got full on gun run by an Army Cobra in the middle of the valley while we were engaged in a firefight with a Taliban unit, and we turned around because this is such a loud, like, deep noise that I really didn't, it was in this valley, and it was just like this deep, like, it's hard to describe, but it was just like when we turned around, it was a Cobra, Army Cobra, that, I mean, I could literally see the pilot. That's how close they were, in a full-on gun run, 30 millimeter cannons basically trying to strafe me and my fire team. They obviously thought we were the Taliban, who were only 30 yards behind us. But we were all kind of running through this valley, and I guess they thought we were running away from them. So we were the bad guys. We didn't think we were going to get out of that alive, because that was, you against the helicopter, good luck in the open.
Was there a conversation that was had between leadership after that of, you just almost smoked our guys?
There was this slight conversation over tea after that back at the base of why they felt that they needed to engage the SEAL unit that was on the ground. But unfortunately, things happen in combat. Happens all the time, and I hate to say that, but it does. When we hear about it, Tillman, and there's hundreds of other blue on blue stories that unfortunately happen. Misrepresentation of individuals. It's difficult for pilots, fast movers, and both fixed and rotary wing to identify us when we're on the ground. And so this was one of those situations that the wrong person cleared the helicopters hot. Helicopters didn't identify the wrong individuals. All the stuff that could have gone wrong went wrong, except luckily that no one got killed. Our chief got hit in the face with a piece of frag. But other than that, we were able to safely, literally dive into rocks and then somehow be able to call a ceasefire, because behind those 30 millimeter guns were 2.5 millimeter rockets. That's kind of how they were doing it. So they'd lay down kind of initial fire with a gun run, and then they would come in with rockets behind it. So then we thought, oh shit, we were able to get away with the guns, but here comes Dash 2 helicopter with rockets, and that never happened. We were able to call a ceasefire, get on the fires freak, and yeah, that was not fun. And that was, I think I was going to get out of that one. But
and you're laughing, you're kind of chuckling about it, which is crazy to think about given the story you just told.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't laughing at the time,
right?
Of course, but I try to look back and make light of all these situations because I think about them all the time, and it forges you in a way that you can't be forged any other way. And so I try to make as light of a situation as I can now. There are other times when you think about it and go, holy shit, like, why am I still here? So try to laugh when I can.
And I think that's a good strategy. On the flip side of that, of a moment where you almost got killed, and that story exceeded all expectations, not at all what I was expecting. Is there one memory you always look back to and you say, I'm so proud that I was a part of that when it happened? I'll be talking about that when I'm 80 years old, or I go to bed and I think about that. I'm just so proud to have been a part of that one thing.
I was part of a hostage rescue mission in 2007 that, I look back on it and go, hey, we actually saved an American life here, which, most of the time we're going out and we're taking enemy lives, which is okay. But, I'll probably look back and I think my kids think it's a pretty cool story that, there's not many hostage rescues that happened. And I was lucky enough to be a part of one, and we were able to rescue an engineer that was working in Afghanistan for many years. He had been taken by the Taliban, and we were able to locate him and go after him at night, and kill the bad guys and rescue the good guy and bring him home to his wife, which was pretty cool.
So is that one of those, are you under nods? So you're going into like a Taliban or bad guy area and you got nods on with the lasers? Is it like out of a movie almost?
Yeah, all these are, I think you could turn all these stories into movies, but yeah, this was, a full on, try to locate a individual that had been taken by Taliban forces for, several months, and they, the news traveled that they were going to kill him, and so the mission got turned over to the military, and we got assigned the mission, and we planned the mission to, like you just said, sneak in at night, under cover of darkness with night vision on, and take out any enemy sentries that were guarding him and rescue him and get him home to his wife in Michigan.
I interviewed a former SEAL Team 6 guy who was on a hostage rescue mission, I believe in 2016, 2015. It was one of those two. And he was talking about how the rules of engagement in a situation like that are essentially, your number one, if the hostage dies, the mission fails, right? So speed is your number one priority. And what was that?
Hostage is the mission.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And he was talking about when he did his, that the rules of engagement were essentially, we know the guys here are bad, and I'm paraphrasing. We know everyone in this compound's a bad guy except the hostage. This isn't a negotiation at this point. We're going in, we're getting this guy no matter what. When you did it in 2007, was it the same thing of when we hit this compound, if you're a fighting age male and we think you have a weapon, it's game over?
Yeah, anybody that was guarding this guy was a 100% terrorist that had taken the individual. So, there was no doubt on that. Yeah. So going in, I mean, I don't think there was any doubt that we were either trying to figure out what the phrase is. I mean, they were guarding this guy for months, and they were just going to hand him over to us. So.
I got it. Yeah, that makes sense. One of the things that fascinates me, and I only got 2 questions or so about this left. One of the things that fascinates me, obviously, is it seems like the SEAL Team 6 profile blew up post-Bin Laden raid. Obama openly talked about it. There's been multiple books written about it. It seems like, I mean, I didn't even know what it was before the Bin Laden raid. I was just a kid at the time. Do you think the attention that the Osama bin Laden raid brought overall has been positive or negative? Because I'm sure it's great for recruiting and interest in SEAL Team 6, but you also have people arguing about who shot bin Laden, what happened. There's a lot of, there's also a lot of negativity. So which overall do you think's won out?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a way to tell the story. There's a way not to tell the story. So I think, me included, I don't love so much information out there. And I don't, there's information that is not going to hurt anybody. And then there's information that potentially could hurt individuals that are still serving. So I think, we always had a rule where, you don't talk about tactics. You don't talk about things that the enemy can use when they're out operating on their own missions, right? And so, I try to do what I try to do when I am asked to speak, because I don't go looking for any of these at all. These all come to me. I try to be just very objective and just tell a story, really, because the reason why I got interested into the SEAL teams, or the reason I was interested in the SEAL teams, because I read every single book from Vietnam that was written. Those books weren't written after Vietnam. I may have ended up in the Army or in the Air Force or in the Marine Corps or something else, But I read stories on the SEAL teams and I thought, oh, wow, this is exactly what I want to do. And so, every time I put something out or I read something, I try to look at it in the lens of, this is a really good story. I'm glad this was put out there, and maybe it'll get others interested and tell about the real individual. What I don't like, most of my buddies will tell you, is individuals that are often, beating their chests and telling you how good they are. And many times those individuals aren't the ones that you want to work with, for sure, or aren't the ones that really have been there and done that. Because I'll tell you, there's most of the individuals that have served 20 and 30 years and done 20 plus combat deployments. You'll never hear anything about them. You'll never hear what they've done, but they've done as much or probably more than any individual, including myself here, chatting about, what we did downrange.
When that event happened, how big of a deal was it within the SEAL Team 6 community that you guys had been the unit that was responsible for taking out bin Laden? Was there a lot of magnitude to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a bit of like ego in that. If you were part of that unit, you're just like, yeah, we got the call to go do this. And I think if you're everybody else, you were angry at that. And then on the other side of it, I definitely think, guys didn't like the media coverage that was around it. There was definitely too much. I think we wanted it to be quiet for a while, but again, who's to say when and where and how, or to say when and where someone decides to talk about what they did. Because I think in 100 years, no one's going to give a shit. And, I think it's kind of getting that way now, where a lot of people do care. A lot of other people, don't care.
Well,
what they do care about is, talking about potentially sometimes specific tactics and things like that.
if you had not you specifically, but if someone in SEAL Team 6, if you went on a podcast and said something that was false or you grossly exaggerated your stories, whatever it might be, which humans do, whether they're in the military or not, they exaggerate. Would you get a call from your former teammates and be like, hey, stop?
Absolutely. Yeah, I said something once that someone called me on, but he was wrong. He was actually wrong and I was right. I'm like, no, you're wrong. Don't you remember X, Y, and Z? And he was like, oh yeah. But that was it. But it was like a personal thing, and we were, best friends. But he was just saying, he was like, I don't remember this or something like that. And I said, no, it was X, Y, and Z. And he said, oh yeah, I guess you're right. So yeah, I think if there's something grossly wrong, I would expect someone to say, hey, I don't remember it that way or whatever. We should hold each other accountable for that, because it's the way we are, and it's the reason why I think we've done well over the years, and we'll continue to do well. We'll continue to recruit individuals that are like-minded, that want to do work that most people can't.
This is kind of the last one before we're going to dive into the mental health stuff, which I'm pumped about. And this is one that the fans are going to know, the viewers are going to know exactly what it is. Obviously, the Army has its own Tier 1 unit called Delta Force, or the unit, as SEAL Team 6 is also DevGru. In your mind, can you explain to the viewers to you personally, what the big difference between those two units are, and which one do you think is the premier Tier 1 unit?
Yeah. So, I think the individuals that attract, or the two units that attract, let's say guys like me and the rest, are very similar. I think we get persuaded by different books and different movies and different individuals we hang around. And what drew me in were more the books that I read from Vietnam, were, a lot of the stories were that SEALs were cowboys, they wanted to grow their hair long, they wanted to wear earrings, they wanted to not fit in, and wanted to wear, blue jeans on operations. That wasn't the Army way. The Army is more kind of a conformist, got to stay in the box type of mentality. And I felt like, the guys I worked with at Dev Group were more, how do we break the rules? How do we bend the rules? Because I don't like rules, and I don't want to have anything to do with it. The rules are like a guideline that you should just know that they're there, and you should be able to travel. You should be able to travel away from them just wide enough where you can't get in trouble, yourself hurt, others hurt, but just need to know that there's some limits there. And so I always felt like the SEAL, and then even, if you're talking about the tiers, the 2-tier units, I felt, we tried to really be cowboys as much as we could while doing the hardest job that, anyone could ever imagine doing. And so I also heard that our, my outfit, we relied on each other more as like teammates, where maybe the Delta operators, they focused more on kind of individual attributes or individual skill sets. Again, this might be objective kind of hearsay, but obviously I was part of the unit, part of my unit. So so there is some truth to this, and then I'd say our initial mission was coming out of the water, right? Was protecting cruise liners. If a cruise liner got hijacked, we would get the call to assault and take out the targets and rescue the hostages. Where on the Army side, planes, trains, and automobiles. So more coming from the land. And so, I always felt like our mission was harder because we had to do everything on that a land mission would have to also do, but we also had to figure out how to do it from the water and come. So it was always I always felt like one more step of just of suck. It was just one more element in there that we had to be really, really, really proficient at and do it well before we got onto dry land to do whatever we had to do.
Was there ever, did you ever do any like missions with each other or train much with each other? Or did you guys just kind of keep to yourselves and they kept to themselves?
No, we train with each other all the time, and it ebbs and flows. So, there's sometimes we'll get together. They'll send their guys to do all our kind of waterborne operations, and then we'll go down there and do a lot of their type of missions. And so, at the end of the day, you realize that you're a lot closer. That you're a lot more alike than you are not. And there's just there's little things here and there that you kind of do things differently. So.
I do now want to jump into the mental health stuff, whether it's PTSD, TBI, whatever it might be. I know that's super, super important to you. And before we kind of go down the line of psychedelics and how you feel about that stuff, have you ever heard the term operator syndrome?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Morgan Luttrell and Dr. Chris Fry, they published a study it was right around 2010, I want to say. Don't quote me on that. But it highlighted that, most of us didn't have quote unquote traditional PTSD, even though we had all the symptoms, depression, anxiety, the outbursts, lack of sleep, the, dysregulation of our hormones and on and on and on. But a lot of that was stemming from, subconcussive blows to the head, the stuff you and I were talking about earlier, all this, breaching and years of football and whatever you want to call it, where it's not like the big boom, where you blow up and you wake up a couple minutes later and you were out, or you got hit in football and you wake up 2 minutes later, but it's like the constant repetition of subconcussive blows over the years. And they're actually, they have a chart now, especially in football. It's not about the single impact. It's how many years you were in and the number of impacts that you've had. And so it really is a number of times that your head's getting hit. And then like everything else, take that and go back to the individual. There are some that can take thousands of blows and probably be okay. And there's others that can take, let's say less than 100 and not be okay. Right. And so, it's all individualized, but operator syndrome is a real thing. And, I think, we're learning more and more that the depression, the anxiety, the sleeplessness, the anger is stemming from, mild traumatic brain injury.
And that was a great way to explain it, because I'm sure most people watching this have never heard that term before, but it seems so relevant in this mental health discussion, not just that we're having, but with a lot of tier one guys that I've seen have the exact same discussion. So for you personally, when you get out, you have some struggles. What were those struggles? And then how did you discover psychedelics as a tool to fix that?
Yeah, well, it was actually started three years before I got out, where I was prescribed my first antidepressant because I was really, I was not having a good time. I was isolating and I was having some real anxiety attacks, some like real stressful moments for no reason. And I was put on those from 2010 to 2017. So 7 years straight of prescription medication. No opioids. I didn't have surgeries, but, I was still on something that caused kind of like a numbing, kind of just numbed you out to things. So really had no feeling. And also had a lot of side effects. So like sexual side effects, weight gain, suicidality. I mean, they're giving prescription medications to individuals that already have potentially tendency or a suicidal ideation medications that cause greater suicidal ideation, right? Like it's just the formula is all wrong. We obviously shouldn't be doing this. And so I was on this train of prescription medications, talk therapy, and then I wasn't getting better, David, and so I started looking into alternative therapy. So TMS, these magnets, transcranial magnetic stimulation, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, that didn't have, still doesn't have a whole lot of like evidence-based, science-backed data behind it, but individuals supposedly were getting better. And so I tried all these things, and I really wasn't getting better. I was really getting worse, and lucky for me, my wife, Amber, who, had been with me, now we're almost going on 27 years, just said, we're going to figure this out. And she started working with a doctor who had sent his best friend to a psychedelic retreat. He was in the same kind of dealing with the same thing I was. He had over 20 combat deployments. It was 30 years in special operations, and nothing was working for this individual. The only thing that did work was psychedelic treatment and with proper integration with a therapist afterwards. And I was experiencing the same exact things this person was, and so they thought, well, what the heck? If it worked for him, it can work for me, maybe. And so I committed. I felt like I had nothing to lose at that time. I tried everything that traditional medicine had offered me. And for me, within 3 days, I was like a new person, completely changed my life. It, saved my life. It saved my family. And the only thing I wanted to do was pay it forward. And it's the first thing I said to Amber when I saw her was, this is exactly what the guys need. And actually I got pissed off because I said, I can't believe that we haven't heard about this. Like, why am I just hearing about this now? I know friends that I served with have been struggling for years, had friends that have taken their own lives, and we're just hearing about something that is so life altering, and healing. And so, my first reaction was pay it forward. My next reaction was just anger that we just didn't know about this. And so, Amber and I just started a grassroots effort to try to get our friends the same treatment. Somebody paid for me because these treatments are expensive. And so that's what we had to do. We had to go find money to pay these retreats to bring other people who were struggling. And that's what we did. And so, we got lucky. Someone wrote us a $25,000 check. We were able to fund, I think, 5 individuals, and then of course that leads to their 2 or 3 friends that need help. And now we got 15 individuals that are reaching out. And so in 2019, we filed officially for our 501c3, which is a nonprofit status, which basically says that we could raise funds. They can be tax deductible to individuals that are giving us money. And then we can pay for, these individuals to go get treated. And that's what we did. And from 2019, the organization's called VETS, Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions. We're closing in on right about 1,000 special operations veterans now that we have funded for the same type of treatment that I did. And, of course, the program has grown immensely. We have several pillars of focus. We're doing research. A new study just came out with Stanford. I think it was January 5th in Nature magazine. We're doing research with Ohio State. We're putting together something right now with Columbia. We're working on federal and state initiatives to open up access right here in the U.S., open up funding. So there's a lot of things happening just off of, my initial treatment in 2017. And really, it's geared towards, what we're working on the nonprofit side, which is veterans. And at the same time, I'm working to establish access and affordability for the rest of America to be able to have access to these treatments at the same time. So
this is what fascinates me about psychedelics. I will admit, I don't know anything about them, haven't done them. I understand the concept of how they work, but I know maybe a lot of older people, they might hear psychedelics and they think, well, isn't that something hippies and surf bums take? What's the point of that? Do we want a bunch of druggies running around? I obviously don't feel that way, which is why we're having this conversation right now. But what would you say to someone who thinks that we're going to give these guys psychedelics? Why are we doing that? Just give them pills, send them to the VA. Like, what would you say to someone like that?
Well, they're giving us pills anyway. So we got, literally hundreds of thousands of not just veterans, I'd say millions of Americans on drugs, literally on drugs. But just because, a doctor said that we can take these drugs, most people think, well, that's okay. And I can live with that. You got to think of psychedelics the same way. All they are is another drug. They're just another medicine to use. They are a powerful medicine. They are not like the others. They're a different class, but they're a class that heals the individual much, much quicker than traditional, modern access we have to modern medicine can do. Psychedelics I wish there was another name for it, but psychedelics just got a bad name in the 60s for, being part of the counterculture. But they were initially intended and they were developed for mental health. So they were developed for mental health, that literally thousands and thousands of papers for their use and for their efficacy on like all mental health issues, depression, anxiety, substance use disorder, and on and on. They got taken and abused by counterculture, and then they got stopped. The research stopped in 1970, and we've just picked up the research again in right around 1990 or 91. Johns Hopkins started researching them again, only because the research was already there. I mean, they just picked up where they left off. And so now we're talking about there's over 250 clinical trials going on around the world, doing the same exact thing they did in the 30s and 40s and 50s. And so we kind of missed out on 50 years of knowledge. But we have to look at these not as countercultural recreational drugs. We have to look at them as these are medicines that are going to allow people to heal really quickly and get to the root cause of issues. And can they be abused as recreational drugs? Absolutely. Just like every other drug can. So they got to look at it as it's a drug utilized for mental health that gets to the root cause of issues much better than anything we have accessible right now, that yes, can be abused as recreational drugs, just like everything else can.
Is it still psychedelics are still federally legal, right?
Most of them are called, they're Schedule 1. The FDA or the DEA schedules them, meaning that there's no medical use and they have a high rate of abuse. We know that the no medical use is incorrect. We know that there's a strong medical case for them. Can they be abused? Yes, they can be abused, but if you control them correctly, we regulate it, clinically guided access in a doctor's office, we're going to be able to reduce the risk. There is a psychedelic that has been being utilized since 1960, is still being utilized today. It's not Schedule 1, it's ketamine assisted therapy. We hear about ketamine like everything else. If you allow ketamine to be prescribed at home and sent home and freely used, yeah, sure, it's going to get abused. But if you provide it in an office where it's clinically guided by a prescriber with a therapist, reducing the risk of abuse for that drug. So it's the one and only drug right now that we can use. There's really good data on it for major depression. There's really good data on it for PTSD. But there's a lot more drugs that are right behind it that are going to be FDA approved here within the next couple of years.
And that's what I wanted to ask on the very back end of that is, what is it going to take? I mean, do you envision there'll be congressional hearings, or does that not even matter? Does the FDA just make the decision themselves?
Yeah, the FDA makes the decision. So the way the medical route goes with psychedelics is just like every other drug. You're a drug manufacturer, you're a scientist, you make a drug, you show it works, you take it through the whole FDA process, and out the backside, they reschedule the drug and it becomes a drug that a doctor can prescribe in an office. And that's exactly how psychedelics are happening. at least in the medical sense. There is a whole non-medical use that is happening in Oregon and Colorado right now. And you don't have to have a medical diagnosis to go to these clinics. But that's outside the federal system. That's like state by state. It's I personally think that there's definitely some good to that, but I am solely focused on the federal medical model because I feel that's the way that we're going to be able to get it into the system the fastest, the right way, properly, what's the word I'm looking for? Regulated, and then properly administered with the right doctors that are going to administer it in a clinic type or an office type setting. And so right now, there's one drug, MDMA. People know it, the street name Molly. MDMA has been through phase 1, phase 2. It's the furthest along. It's finished 2 phase 3 trials with over 70% efficacy rates for reducing PTSD and its symptoms. Most of us think that MDMA assisted therapy will be FDA approved by the end of this year, for PTSD specifically.
And so let's assume that happens, and if I'm a veteran and I have really bad PTSD issues, it could be as simple as if you had asthma, you go to the doctor diagnoses you, he prescribes it. It sounds like this would have to be taken not maybe at home, but in a controlled setting. But it would just be...
Yeah, there's going to be, David, like there's definitely some more operational pieces to it, but in a simple process is exactly what you said. It is going to be another medicine that if you're a doctor and you're an individual that has PTSD and you come to my office and I do a diagnosis and I think you have PTSD, I will be able to prescribe this to you under these certain parameters, right? You're going to have a therapist there. There's going to have to be there's a whole kind of process that goes along with psychedelics because they're not just like any other drug. You do go through an experience. So it's going to have to be done that way, but you are going to be able to have access to it. Like that's the idea, right? It's not, you don't have to go find it underground. It's not going to be illegal. This will be a legal 100% FDA approved pharmaceutical that you'll be able to take along with therapy. So that's the other thing, is that all psychedelics right now that are coming to market will be paired with psychotherapy. So it's the drug and the therapy.
I see. I think it's a great idea because we have a pill problem in America to begin with. We have an opioid problem. We've got half the country, young males, hopped up on, SSSIs. It just seems like there might have been a little overprescribing of pills in this country. And if this is going to be good for veterans and it gets people off of the pill farms, which we've all watched flood the market, I'm all for it. I don't know if I would have been 3 years ago because I didn't know anything about it, and I've tried to interview and learn more about it. And I don't know why anyone would be against it at this point. To me, it does make sense to be, like you said, they're already on drugs, but the drugs aren't working. Wouldn't it make more sense to put them on something under controlled supervision that's actually going to work?
Yeah, we just need to provide better access to new treatments that are working. And so if there's something out there that is better than I call old technology, we might as well, we have to take a look at it. We shouldn't be blocking access to drugs right now that we're utilizing that are, kind of 30 and 40 years old that aren't working. And, many of these drugs get you off of, the opioids and some, a lot of these antidepressants, SSRIs, as you were talking about. And they're not for everybody. There is a, if you want to call it prior authorization, or meaning like you do have to qualify to get these prescriptions, but that's okay. That means that like we can't just give them out to everybody. Like you have to go through the process. You have to go. You have to be diagnosed. You may have to try other traditional treatments first and fail them before you try these. But the point is, you should have access to these if you need them. That's the bottom line, right? You should not be able to have access to them. So it's, it's an exciting time. There are definitely, there's a lot of skepticism. I just think, like everything else, something that's new and innovative and potentially too good to be true, we just need to be careful. And I think we are being careful. There's some that are not. Those are and those are bad actors, and like every other, bad actors will be found and they'll go away. But fighting 20 years of combat and coming back and not having modern tools to deal with it is just not. It's unsat, right? It's not. It's not what the American needs at this point, right? The American who's coming back from war needs to enjoy the rest of their 40 years of life with their family, with their kids, with their spouse, whatever. And so if we can give them that opportunity, let's try to at least figure out how to do that.
I could not agree more. Okay, I have 2 questions left. They're fun ones. We'll end with a little bit of humor, and a little bit of serious humor as well, though. I don't know if you can see it, but right over my shoulder, I have a copy of the DVD Red Dawn. It is, in my opinion, the greatest movie ever made. I don't know if you've ever seen it before. I'm sure you're familiar. It's about the Russians invading the U.S., Patrick Swayze, 1984, great film. If the U.S. gets invaded, what would be your advice, your best survival plan for a invasion of the U.S.?
Well, since I am a Texas resident, I don't have to travel too far. I will probably just link up with several of my old former teammates. And I think, aside from having some, severe, or some heavy weaponry, I think we, when it came to small unit tactics, I think we'd be okay. We don't have, planes and, well, I can't say that. There's some helicopters and stuff around there, but on a large scale, I think, we'd be hurting, but as a small unit, I think we'd be just fine.
I love that. I love that. And then this is the final one. Let's pretend for a second. Let's go to the land of the imagination. You're in a Black Hawk helicopter. It's you and we'll say 12 to 15 DevGru operators. You go through a time hole to 1943 Germany. Okay? You're smack dab between Switzerland and Hitler at the Eagle's Nest. Is 15 SEAL Team 6 operators in an armed helicopter. Are you confident you can fly in there and kill them?
We have modern weaponry.
Oh, absolutely. You've got night vision. You've got M4s. You've got machine guns. You got whatever you want.
Yeah, I think we can get pretty close. I think we could take out a lot of folks on the way, and I think we can get lucky enough if he decides to put himself out there in a spot that we can take a shot. I'm highly confident.